I'm going to reject your assertion that homosexuality is some kind of evolutionary dead end. I'm going to suggest instead that there are actually valid reasons as to why homosexual behaviour in human adults might provide an evolutionary advantage. I'm going to skip over what I see as the biggest flaw in your argument that suggests that homosexuals can't reproduce without modern technology, because there are plenty of homosexuals, both modern and historic, who've managed to reproduce quite successfully without the aid of any technological intervention. And to say that a true homosexual would not have sex with somebody of the opposite gender really demonstrates a fundamental lack of understanding of sexual orientation. Sexual orientation dictates what gender a person finds sexually attractive. It doesn't necessarily have anything to do with who they actually have sex with. Human beings are more than capable of having sex with a partner they do not find sexually attractive. Now, you seem to find this idea odd, but there are plenty of people, both gay and straight, who can attest to having woken up in that I would rather gnaw my arm off than wake him or wake her situation, and plenty more who, after the fires of passion have subsided, have thought to themselves, ooh, shit. So having sex isn't something that we as a species tend to find particularly challenging. Now, I posted a video some time ago that suggested how homosexuality could provide a survival advantage for early human societies, and what I've done is just put up a link here on the side so that I don't have to cover old ground. What I do want to cover here is what appears to be a flaw in your understanding about genetics. You suggest that if homosexuality is genetic, a true homosexual would not be able to pass on this genetic marker. So, leaving aside my earlier rebuttal of this claim with regard to choice of sexual partner, you're also making an assumption that any homosexual genetic trait isn't recessive. But the low incidence of homosexuality in the general populace, about 10% or so, it tends to be the commonly accepted proportion, actually suggests that if homosexuality is genetic, then it's a recessive trait. So what this means is that it would be perfectly possible for heterosexuals to carry this genetic marker, as you call it, and pass it along their bloodline, and there'd be absolutely no requirement at all for homosexuals to pass this gene on themselves. You also seem to be missing out a very broad spectrum of sexuality that isn't cited at the polar ends. There's a very wide-ranging degree of bisexuality that could also come into play. The results from Kinsey and other studies do back up this viewpoint. So, looping back to evolution, you state that it only makes sense that positive attributes are likely to be passed on as part of the natural selection model. So what makes you assume that homosexuality isn't a positive and beneficial trait? As I've said, my other video that I've posted up on the site here actually suggests quite the contrary. In fact, much of the negative perception of homosexual behaviour has its roots in the teachings of the Abrahamic religions. Many other cultures have not necessarily had this problem of seeing homosexuality as a negative trait. So, whereas antisocial criminality, genetic or otherwise, is undesirable because it directly harms individuals and it harms the fabric of society, comparing homosexuality, genetic or otherwise, with antisocial criminal behaviour is both insulting and it's invalid, because unlike criminal behaviour, homosexual behaviour neither harms individuals nor harms society. In fact, the reverse is more often true. Homophobic bigotry, defined and encouraged by those who follow the illogical mythology of a tribe of Bronze Age desert nomads, is far more likely to result in harm to individuals who happen to be gay. So perhaps the genetic markers that we should be more concerned about are not those that make us sin, but those that make people susceptible to irrational beliefs and irrational fears, and often result in outbursts of extreme violence and other antisocial behaviour.